Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to Red 5 Reviews. Today's episode is a book review for Star Wars-MAUL Lockdown, written by New York Times bestselling author Joe Schreiber, who, as most of you Star Wars fans know, also wrote the novels Death Troopers and Red Harvest. Now, this book was published back in 2014, and I believe it was released in the month of January of 2014. And for the longest time, I only had the mass market paperback version that came with a Legends banner that you could buy at Barnes & Noble and such. But I was in the market for the hardcover, and it was really hard to find. I could find it online, but it was just always very expensive. And eventually I found this copy for around $20. And it's a former library book, which explains why I was a little bit on the cheaper side. But as far as former library books go, it's actually in pretty decent condition. And I just love the dust jacket. The design of the dust jacket was designed by Scott Beal, and I love the artwork, especially with Maul in chains on both sides of the cover. It's just a great dust jacket. Now, this will be a spoiler-free review. But with that said, guys, let's get started. Darth Maul is dispatched by his master Darth Sidious to the prison system known as Cog-7. While there, Maul assumes the alias of Jagannath and must seek out a weapons dealer known as Iram Radek to acquire a nuclear weapon. During his infiltration of Cog-7, Maul is forced to undertake gladiatorial-like prison battles. And now for my thoughts. This book was a lot of fun, and I surprisingly enjoyed it. I say that because I'll admit that I was a little skeptical about reading this one because the last Joe Schreiber novel that I read was the Old Republic book, Red Harvest. And if you saw my review for that one, then you know I was definitely not a fan. But I'm glad to say that Joe Schreiber really came through on this one. The book is very dark and it can get pretty intensely gruesome, and in pure Joe Schreiber fashion, he spares no expense with the violent descriptions. What I loved about this book is that it doesn't make things easy for our main character. You hear of Maul having to fight in gladiatorial-like prison battles, and I'm sure you immediately would think, wouldn't he just use the Force or his lightsaber? Well, that's the fun part. He is actually forbidden to use those things in order to keep his identity as a Sith secret, which I thought made for a compelling story because we see more of Darth Maul's ferocity and strength even without the use of his Force abilities or his weapons. This book also had some surprises, at least in my case. I'm not going to spoil much, but there is a character or characters that appeared in this story that I was not expecting to be there. I'm definitely not saying it doesn't make sense why they would be in the book, just saying I was surprised. And I don't have a lot of negatives for this book with the exception of slow pacing moments on occasion, but I'd say that the big one for me was that I was at first confused about where this story fit on the timeline. This book was released after the novel Darth Maul Shadowhunter, and is even listed as so on the Legends timeline. But this book is actually a prequel, as it takes place 1 year before the events of Shadowhunter. So while I'm not 100% sure why it was listed as taking place after Shadowhunter, I thought I would recommend just keeping that in mind before reading this book to avoid any further confusion. But other than that, this is a book I would for sure recommend, especially if you're a fan of Darth Maul or if you're wanting to complete reading the Star Wars Legends timeline. I wouldn't say this book was better than Darth Maul Shadowhunter, but it is definitely a good book and a fun read, and again, I definitely recommend it. I'm going to give Star Wars-MAUL Lockdown by Joe Schreiber 4 out of 5 stars. But what did you guys think? Did you like it or hate it? Either way, be sure to post your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll for sure check those out. And thanks so much for checking out this review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. And if you did, be sure to hit that like button, and please consider hitting that subscribe button if you'd like to stay updated for more of my reviews, whether it be for Star Wars Legends or other things in pop culture. Be sure to stay tuned for my next review for a story that will take place outside of the Star Wars galaxy, which will be the novelization to the graphic novel Venom: Lethal Protector. But until then, this is Red 5, standing by.